Chile Vision. Today we will be looking at old newscasts of Chile so that we can better understand the current Chile government along with current social and economic issues. Throughout the 20th century, rulers struggled with stopping inflation in different ways, including wage freezes and cutting public spending. Today, we have many different exports, including vegetables, fruits, wine, and salmon, not limiting ourselves to copper or nitrate. One of the reasons Chile has struggled with inflation so long was due to the dependence on a single export, first nitrate, then copper. We will see that throughout this time, there was a huge shift to urbanization from an agricultural lifestyle. With changing social dynamics, Chile was exposed to many strikes held by the unhappy working party, which was ill represented throughout the 20th century. Because there were three almost equally popular political parties, it was hard for a single party to gain the majority.
And now an update on student protests. To understand the root of the problem, we must understand the harsh difference between private and public schools. Almost 90% of students in fully privatized schools will go on to university, whereas only 10 to 15% do so from subsidized or fully public schools. On national exams, the average scores for students in Chile's public schools are almost half of that of their counterparts in private schools. Only 38% of 18 to 24-year-olds attend universities. Interestingly, the tuitions of private and public universities are not substantially different. However, admission to private university depends on scores and grades that are unrealistic for a public high school student to achieve. Therefore, public high school students are not well prepared for the academic rigor required to attend private universities. This is a major source of social inequality and the root of the unrest. President Piñera's newest attempt to calm riots was to propose a $1.23 billion boost to education spending through business taxation. This attempt was dismissed as inadequate by the students, and the unrest and revolt continues. The first riot of 2013 got extremely violent in opposition to Piñera's plan.
Here we are in September of 1891, at the end of a 9-month-long civil war. The conflict was between our current president, José Manuel Balmaceda, and the Congress. The war has ended in favor of the Congress, causing the suicide of defeated liberal president José Manuel Balmaceda. This victory marks the end of the liberal era and the start of the parliamentary republic. Because of the unrest in the working class, two political parties have emerged in order to bring the working class's voice into the government. The two parties are the Liberal Alliance and the Workers' Federation of Chile, leaning more towards Marxism and communism than the Liberal Alliance. Here we are in 1918, and the quickly popular Liberal Alliance political party has just gained the majority in the chamber. Coup just took place this week in favor of Arturo Alessandri, a member of the Liberal Alliance, but he has refused to rule under military rule and has fled to Italy. Another military coup, led by Carlos Ibáñez and Marmaduke Grove, has overthrown the conservative. Alessandri has been asked to come back to Chile with the hope that he will create a new constitution that is meant to strengthen the role of the president as well as give the state more power to intervene in social and economic issues. Carlos Ibáñez, part of the Liberal Alliance, became president through rigged elections in 1927. He borrows heavily from the U.S., using money to build infrastructure. His approach to the working class and lack of strong political ideology has left Ibáñez without a political party strongly backing him. This has led to his recent exile in July of 1931. Because of Ibáñez and Alessandri's failure and lack of effective leadership, the oligarchic government system has lost popularity. This loss led to the growth of a new political party, the Socialist Party, with a strong Marxist outlook. Alessandri has returned as president. Chile, along with the rest of the world, is undergoing a depression. The finance minister, Augusto Ross, has taken on inflation rates by cutting public spending, which has not affected inflation rates, but has substantially reduced the unemployment rate. Ross's strategy to stop inflation by cutting public spending has caused labor unrest. Industrial strikes have threatened Ross's plans for recovery. Alessandri has reacted by sending in troops to break up the strikes and exiling labor leaders. Alessandri has found himself with little power as the left has started to gain popularity. This September, The Nazi Party, led by González von Meriz, has tried to overthrow the government but failed, resulting in Alessandri's ordering for 62 Nazi members to be killed. As industrialization increases, the tension between capital and labor groups deepens. Gabriel González Vindela, our radical president, dismissed 3 communist ministers from his cabinet today, losing the support of the communists. There have been many violent strikes, which have caused police to take action. As the government tries to prevent further riots, they have declared a state of siege and suspended civil liberties. Here we are in 1948, and the disagreements between the radicals and the communists have caused the Congress to pass the Law for Defense of Democracy, which has outlawed the Communist Party. Carlos Ibáñez, president in 1927, has won the presidency again and is unable to follow through with the promises of his campaign. George Alessandri, Arturo Alessandri's son, is our current president and won as a coalition of the oligarch conservatives and liberals. The center was split in the election, allowing a new party to emerge, the Christian Democratic Party, that drew many people away from the radicals. The current president, Eduardo Frei, a Christian Democrat, received funds from the West Germany and other European countries, as well as U.S. sources like the CIA. There has been a lot of competition between Christian Democrats and the left, even though their ideology overlaps in nationalization of industry and redistribution of wealth in favor of the working class. The aim of Frei's presidency was to Chileanize the copper industry. Though Frei has had a lot of success in education and public health, the failures of the copper and land reforms overshadowed the success. None of the political parties have a majority, but each still tried to make large changes on their own. The failure of any of the parties to make change is causing the collapse of our democratic state. Today, Salvador Allende, a Marxist, was elected as president. Now we go to Rowan to hear his bio.
Salvador Allende was born in Santiago, Chile on June 26, 1908. He came from an upper-class family with a long history supporting liberal and progressive causes. This background ultimately influenced his political ideals when he ran for office. He eventually ended up co-founding the Socialist Party of Chile in 1933. He ran for president in 1952, 1958, and 1964 and lost each time. However, in 1970, the Chilean people finally elected him as president. Allende demonstrated extremely liberal policies, almost to the point of being a Marxist leader. In general, Salvador Allende's policy decisions were left of center. All of Allende's political strategies involved a large amount of government involvement. He raised minimum wage, expanded the accessibility and availability for education, food, and housing assistance. He advocated for the rights of the lower-class people in Chile and implemented policies that help poor people earn more. He made education more affordable by utilizing government subsidies and created programs to help increase availability for healthcare. One of the most significant changes that he made was the nationalization of many of Chile's largest industries, particularly the copper mining and banking industries. While in office, Allende granted 3,000 scholarships to the Mapuche's children who belong to the indigenous race of Chilean people. Allende inspired a group of Allendistas who participated voluntarily in charity work in the poorer areas of Chile. One of Allende's most significant socialist policy changes was his decision to seize Chilean land to redistribute it. He nationalized the land to try to equally distribute it between the Chilean people. By doing this, he hoped to close the income gap between poor and rich Chileans. In general, poorer workers supported his legislation while middle and upper-class Chileans were frustrated by his socialist redistribution of their property and wealth. An important fact about Salvador Allende's presidency is his decision to appoint Augusto Pinochet as the army commander 18 days before the military coup on September 11, 1973. Augusto Pinochet would eventually abuse his role as the leader of the military and forcefully take the presidency away from Allende. During the 1973 coup, Augusto Pinochet attacked the presidential palace and Allende proceeded to commit suicide during the raid. He did have a lot of success with his goal of closing the income gap in Chile. However, the legislative and judicial branches were consistently at odds with Allende because they did not support or encourage his socialist form of government. The Christian Democrats that had originally elected him consistently disapproved of his leftist policies and a close relationship with Cuba. The presidential election of 1970 in Chile was held on September 4th, 1970. None of the candidates won by a clear majority. Salvador Allende ended up with 36.6% of the vote between the total three candidates. Ultimately, the Chilean Congress holds the power to decide who the new president will be in this situation. The majority party in Chilean Congress at that time were the Christian Democrats, who overwhelmingly voted for Salvador Allende to be the new president. Allende's opposition's campaigns for the presidency were highly influenced by the CIA. They attempted to appoint a candidate that was not socialist like Allende. Allende personally requested money from the KGB to help keep up against the CIA-funded opposition. Ultimately, the CIA's attempts failed when Congress elected Allende to be the new president of Chile. The United States government has never clearly supported communist or radically socialist countries throughout history. Chile is an example of a country that the United States government did not support. Richard Nixon, the president at the time, did not only discourage Allende's government structure, he actually opposed it. During the early 1970s, Chile's close connection with Cuba worried the Nixon administration. The U.S. government had previously viewed Chile as a potential leader for democracy in the developing world when the previous president, Eduardo Frei Montalva, was in office. Frei's style of government more closely mirrored the United States democratic style of government. Because Chile had some history as a democratic nation, the U.S. government felt strongly about converting it back to a new and influential democratic partner for the U.S. in South America. The Nixon administration, with the help of the CIA led by Henry Kissinger, took action in a few different ways to transition the government back to a democracy and away from Allende's Marxist policies. They organized and funded strikes against Allende, fueled Allende's opposition's campaigns, encouraged the coup where Augusto Pinochet took over the government by military force, and also imposed economic sanctions on Chile. Eventually, the coup that the appointed army commander, Augusto Pinochet, led against Salvador Allende was the most effective step to overthrow his presidency. Pinochet ultimately ended up being elected president by the people of Chile in June 1974.